Department of Statistics Malaysia (DOSM) reports that Malaysia's home ownership rate stood at 78% in 2024. On paper, that suggests nearly 8 in 10 Malaysians own a home, a relatively strong figure by regional standards. But if ownership is that high, why does affordability remain such a persistent concern? Today we unpack what this number really tells us about Malaysia's housing market. Join me, Surveyor Sulaiman Saheh, Director of Research and Consultancy Services at Rahim & Co. Sulaiman, thank you so much for being with us. First of all, looking forward, 78% ownership sounds strong. Regionally, Malaysia compares relatively well against many developed economies. But from a research standpoint, how should we interpret this number? And is this truly a sign of a healthy housing ecosystem, or does the headline mask underlying financial stress within households?
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Firstly, we just want to share our excitement of being part of the Chestertons. Rahim is under Chestertons now, looking at things globally, which actually brings us more perspective to the national housing agenda or issues. One of it is what we actually just highlighted about the reported 78% home ownership rate that is actually in Malaysia, which is actually by international standards is actually quite high. But the meaning of this 78% does not come as obvious as you would actually expect. You need to actually look at the number into more detail. The number that is actually represented by the 78% is actually inclusive of the formal housing, which is the official housing, the proper housing with the planning control, security measures, safety measures and whatnot, including also the informal housing, which essentially is rumah kampung in the villages, informal housing, some of the living quarters that were actually built on a manual basis or without proper documentation and whatnot also is actually inclusive. So if you look into the numbers in terms of owning a property, owning a house, yes, there's a lot of people, especially in the rural areas, actually owns the kampung houses, the village houses. But whether these are actually houses that are of a certain standard, of a certain safety measure within the planning control, with services, full services and amenities, linkages with road transportation and whatnot, water supply, or even with garbage refuse, rubbish disposal system, whether that's actually need to actually be looked at. And that is exactly what the main concern right now. If we were to look at the number of 78% and we think that our home ownership rate is actually quite high, but when we look into further detail, the ownership numbers does not really reflect the actual ownership of a proper housing facility with all the amenities and services that are actually required for a modern society that we live in.
Yeah. Now here's the paradox. If nearly 80% of already own homes, why does affordability remain such a dominant issue? Are we confusing home ownership rate with housing affordability, which are technically two very different metrics, Sulaiman?
Yes, it is. It is very much so. Two different things. Ownership means you actually own the property, be it an ownership through inheritance, something that you actually own through the generation from your forefathers or your great-grandfather or whatnot, and versus an ownership of purchasing a new property, which you want to live in an urban environment closer to your places of work or places of amenities and whatnot. So the two parameters are actually different. One is actually ownership, which actually entails all sorts of forms and quality of premises, quality of houses. The other one is actually the affordability to make the purchases, especially for the proper formal housing stocks that's actually available in the market. And this is where the affordability comes into a bigger and more significant number to be looked at. Whereas ownership may be a bit skewed, especially in the rural areas. One thing is, if you look at the states in the country, some of the lesser developed states actually have a very high, like in Kelantan, having a high ownership rate of 85% versus KL at about 60%. Whether when you actually look at the number into more detail, that number of 85% in Kelantan, the ownership, for people to actually afford, it is still the mismatch between the prices and the income level. And the number of 85% in Kelantan actually reduced significantly to below 20% when you cross-match against the quality of houses that people own versus the desired houses versus the actual type of houses that they actually own over there.
Yeah, Sulaiman, the reason I asked questions before because of national average can be misleading. Is it fair to say that the 78% figure that may be supported by higher ownership in rural or secondary states, while major urban centers like in Klang Valley, Penang, Johor Bahru remain severely unaffordable relative to median incomes? And should we be analysing housing stress at city level rather than national level?
Indeed, we need to actually look at it into a more localized area because property is not the same throughout the country. Cost of living is not the same throughout the country. Income level is not the same across the country. So when we look into the affordability angle, you need to look at the locality of the premises of the houses and whether the population in that area can actually afford based on the income level, based on their cost of living, and the type of properties that they actually want to actually own. So when we look into the definition here, it is important for us to actually look into the local area, be it at a city level or even an area level within certain mukim or certain district, but definitely not at a national level alone, and definitely not at the state level, because within a particular state, there could be urban areas with a lot of differences in terms of the cost of living versus the village areas versus the rural areas. And that's where it is actually important to actually define the two according to the locality with its different dynamics and parameters in place.
Yeah. Sulaiman, let's talk about demographics. Do we see signs that younger Malaysians are entering home ownership later than previous generations? If the trend continues, does it create longer-term economic consequences in terms of, for example, wealth accumulation and also retirement security? Your thoughts on this?
This is actually a very crucial point. Due to the level of prices that's actually still beyond the reach of many Malaysians, on top of that, there's the cost of living that's continuously increasing. And the wage growth, the income growth, that is actually rather sluggish. That creates a bigger disparity between the home ownership and within the affordability level of different areas. And this impact especially the younger generations, because if you can imagine, the elder societies probably have actually owned the properties and actually bought the properties years ago. And for these younger generation, they would actually purchase a property or like to live closer to their place of work, where their children are actually schooling, and these are more costly. And with that, they have been delaying due to the unaffordability of the house, to the house purchase, difficulty in getting loans to actually make ends meet between the income level and the expenditure, which actually will actually have an impact towards the later stages in their life. Because even right now, according to EPF, a significant chunk of the members would actually have to continue repaying their housing loans after they have actually retire. And this is where if you start to delay, having to delay, be it by design or most likely here due to the situation, and they will only clear up their loan much later in life. And that would actually, there's an issue of retirement security in terms of their way of life and income levels.
Sulaiman, talking about, we still see overhang in certain segments, especially higher price, higher rises. How do we reconcile high ownership rates with unsold stock? Is the real issue not access but mismatch between income level and what's being built?
This is exactly why we need to differentiate the notation of ownership versus affordability. And the ownership here, it must be trimmed down to the ownership of the desired property to the current standards, meeting the current requirements. The affordability level, which actually means that they want to actually buy a particular house, which gives the location is good, the size is good, the surroundings actually are excellent, and that is still beyond the reach of many. And so when we actually look at this, when it becomes unaffordable, that's why the unsold completed units, or in the past year, we actually used the word overhang, remains a significant number. And when we actually talk about the number of overhang properties here, or unsold completed properties, there's almost 25,000 units that are actually residential property, plus another service apartment category of another 25,000, totaling about 48,000 in total. And this, interestingly enough, it is not just happening within the higher price bands, but also within the affordable or seemingly affordable price band of below 300,000 or below between 300 to 500,000. There's also a huge number within those categories.
Thank you so much. That is Surveyor Sulaiman Saheh, Director Research and Consultancy Services, Rahim and Co. Chestertons. Thank you, as always, for your insights. The 78% headline is encouraging, but as we have discussed earlier, the real story lies in the structure beneath the statistic.